The Ugandan LGBTQIA+ community is describing yesterday as a sad day. This is following Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni signing one of the world's toughest anti-queer laws. This includes harsh sentences for what it terms aggravated homosexuality. Same-sex relations were already illegal in the East African country, but the new law goes further. It stipulates that the capital punishment with serial offenders against the law and transmissions of a terminal illness like HIV/AIDS. It also decrees a 20-year sentence for promoting homosexuality. This is not the first time Uganda has passed a law like this. The current one is an amended version of the bill adopted earlier on this month after Museveni returned to Parliament. It stipulated that merely identifying as a homosexual is not a crime and revised a measure that obliged people to report homosexual activity to only require reporting when a child is involved. Let us take this topic further, talking to Letlhogonolo Mokgoroane, who is a legal practitioner and also a sexual orientation, gender identities activist, to give us more on this decision that has been taken by the President. Letlhogonolo, good morning and thank you so much for making time for us. So some confusion around the act that has been signed is that the act that the President has signed doesn't include capital punishment.
Well, it's interesting because the act, in fact, does include capital punishment. What has happened is that the president had sent it back and said that it's not harsh enough. And then the parliament worked on it. And now the president has now signed it. And the one that is signed for aggravated homosexuality, there is capital punishment, which is death. And for an offense of homosexuality, there's life imprisonment.
Okay, so that has now been brought back. This is now speaking about the capital punishment, but with the previous bill, there was no capital punishment. Was this a decision that was taken by the parliamentarians to include capital punishment?
Yes, if you remember, what happened was the parliament had sent it to the president to sign. The president sent it back, and one of the reasons why he sent it back was that the penalties, if you can call it that, were not harsh enough. So it seems what Parliament that did was revise certain things. As we can see in homosexuality, it's now life imprisonment. And in terms of aggravated homosexuality, it's death. Mm-hmm.
We also see that with children as well, it says that punishment for child offenders, a child who is convicted of the offense under Section 2 or 3 of this Act shall, instead of the punishment prescribed under this relevant section, be liable on conviction to imprisonment for a period not exceeding 3 years. So children could also be convicted under this Act?
Yes, so children can be convicted of aggravated homosexuality or homosexuality. And if they are convicted, either then getting life imprisonment or capital punishment, the Act says instead what will happen is that they will be imprisoned for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Then there's also people who give property or rent out their property to somebody who is believed to be a homosexual. What does the Act say about them?
Well, the Act does a number of things, Aldrin, which is really, really hard. So what I will do is I just want to read to you specifically so that the listeners are. It says, a person who knowingly allows any premises to be used by any person for purposes of homosexuality or to commit an offense under this Act commits an offense, and on conviction to imprisonment of a period not exceeding 7 years. So if you are using your Airbnb, your house for homosexuality or any offense under the Act, what happens in this regard is that you, upon conviction, will be liable for 7 years in prison.
Okay, there's also another caveat that seems to be put in place, and I don't know how far this would go, because one of the debates that has been raging on is how do you identify that somebody is a homosexual? What means test do you put in place? But also the other part is that somebody could accuse somebody else of being a homosexual and then opening a case. And now the Act says that there is a false sexual allegations and there's punishment for that as well. But does this really go far enough?
Well, it's interesting. What the Act does is that I don't think it goes far enough, but what the Act does is it tries to create a number of safeguards. So it says that if you are suspected and it's found that you have not committed this offense of homosexuality, then you will not be held liable in terms of the Act. But what the Act also does is that it says if you suspect that someone is a homosexual or committing an act of homosexuality, then you must report them. Now, what the Act has done, which the bill did, is at least it doesn't criminalize the identifying as homosexuality. What it criminalizes is let's call it the performance of homosexuality. So if you are going to do what a number of things says, either as aggravated homosexuality or homosexuality, then you will be liable of an offense. So there are some limited safeguards. I don't know how far these safeguards will go, but in many instances, it's not everyone is going to be found guilty of this. Is that you have to perform particular acts which the Act prescribes as either homosexuality or aggravated homosexuality. And then in those instances, you'll be, upon conviction, be liable of either life imprisonment or death.
And then also the last one is on child grooming. Child grooming, this is something that we know that it is unlawful to be grooming a child for any sexual activity, but here specifically speaking about homosexuality.
So what's interesting...
Okay, we seem to have a technical problem there to that line there to Letlhogonolo Mokgoroane. Letlhogonolo, let's try again. The Act there speaking about child grooming and now in relation to homosexuality. And as I said a bit earlier on, that it is already unlawful to groom a child.
It is already unlawful to groom a child, but what it seems specifically that the Act is trying to do in grooming a child is to ensure that you're not grooming a child for purposes of homosexuality or aggravated homosexuality. Now, what's really interesting for me in this regard is that the kind of moralistic understanding of at least the Ugandan anti-queer law is the fact that it's saying other grooming may be fine, because other grooming, although we know is supposed to be unlawful, this particular type of grooming has been taken out. So you can groom children of opposite sex, perhaps, but you can't groom children for same-sex interactions or for aggravated or for homosexuality. So it seems it's trying to say we don't want our children to be exposed in any manner or form to homosexuality as the Act defines it, or aggravated homosexuality as the Act defines it.
Thank you so much for your time. Letlhogonolo Mokgoroane there, legal practitioner and also a sexual orientation and gender identities activist.